Welcome to NFL Nexus. In the NFL draft, teams spend literally months, sometimes even years, scouting players. They're all hunting for that one guy who can completely change the direction of their franchise. But here's the thing. Sometimes the pick that gets everybody talking isn't number one overall. Nope, it's the one that makes everyone, from fans on the couch to analysts in the studio, just stop and go, wait, what are they thinking? Today, we're diving deep into one of the most polarizing, high-stakes picks of the entire 2026 NFL Draft. And this right here, this is the razor's edge the Minnesota Vikings are now walking. They made a pick that some people are calling a potential masterstroke, a genius move, and others are calling a catastrophic gamble. Seriously, this is the kind of decision that could be studied for years as either a brilliant heist or, well, a cautionary tale. The whole legacy of this draft class, maybe even the jobs of the people who made the pick, could all come down to how this one player's future plays out. All right, let's get into it. And there it is, draft night. The commissioner steps up, the Vikings are on the clock with the 18th pick, and the name they announce is Caleb Banks. And I mean it when I say a genuine ripple of surprise just shot through the entire league. You can just imagine the scene in other war rooms, GMs and scouts scrambling, flipping through their notes, looking at each other. This was not the name anybody had penciled in for Minnesota, not by a long shot. Okay, so to really get why this was such a jaw-dropper, you have to understand the context. We need to look at the draft board at that exact moment. The Vikings had choices, a lot of them, and the path they chose was a serious detour from the script that pretty much every draft expert and insider had been writing for them for months. I mean, the consensus was just crystal clear. It was almost a lock. You could look at 100 mock drafts, and 99 of them would have the same thing. Dylan Thieneman, the safety from Oregon, was going to be a Minnesota Viking. He was what you call a high-floor guy, a super reliable, incredibly productive player at a position where the Vikings desperately needed help. The guy was a tackling machine, a real leader in the secondary, and just considered one of the safest bets in the whole draft. And when pick number 18 rolled around, he was still just sitting there on the board waiting for them. It felt like it was already written in stone. And here's what's so fascinating. It wasn't just Thieneman. The Vikings had a whole buffet of what you'd call safer prospects, all sitting there for the taking at other positions they needed to address. You had Mekhi Lemon, this dynamic receiver from USC, a fantastic route runner who would have been a perfect number 2 option for them. Then there was Jermod McCoy, a long, athletic corner from Tennessee, and you can never, ever have too many good cornerbacks in today's NFL. These were high-quality football players, guys with clean medicals, guys that everybody agreed had bright futures ahead of them, without any of the huge question marks that were about to define the guy the Vikings actually took. Which brings us right to the absolute core of this whole debate. With all these solid, consensus-approved players right there for the picking, why did the Vikings just look past all of them and instead take this massive swing on a player that a lot of teams had reportedly flagged with some serious medical concerns? It's the question that immediately defined their entire draft night. And hey, if you want to stay on top of all the breakdowns from this year's draft, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our deep dives here on NFL Nexus. So let's talk about the gamble. And honestly, calling it a gamble is probably putting it way too mildly. This was a true push all your chips to the middle of the table kind of move. The kind that can make careers or, end them. So to get inside the Vikings' heads, we first have to really appreciate the massive, franchise-altering risk that they willingly decided to take on. Let's really break down what they're betting against. So this right here really lays it out in black and white. Caleb Banks was the 37th ranked player on the consensus big board. Now, that board is an average of rankings from dozens and dozens of draft experts. The Vikings took him at number 18. That is a 19-pick difference. In the first round of the NFL draft, that is a massive gap. It's what we call a significant reach. It means the Vikings' evaluation of him was just on a completely different planet than what most of the league thought. And it tells you they were so convicted that they weren't willing to wait and see if he might fall to them later. That difference alone shows you this was an incredibly bold move that just flew in the face of conventional wisdom. So what explains that huge 19-spot difference? Why did the rest of the league have him ranked so much lower? Well, it all comes down to one big, flashing neon red flag, a serious injury to his foot. And we're not talking about a minor sprain here. This was a structural issue that had a huge and, for most teams, a profoundly negative impact on his draft stock. You gotta remember, for a defensive tackle, their feet are everything. That's their foundation. It's where every ounce of their power comes from. Any kind of problem there is a massive, massive deal. And this timeline, this really paints the picture of why teams were so concerned. First, he broke his foot during the 2025 season. That injury limited him to just 3 games. So right off the bat, teams had very little recent game tape to look at, which makes it way harder to project how good he'll be. Then, and this is the real killer, in March, just a month before the draft, he re-injured it and had to have surgery. A re-injury is always a huge red flag for doctors because it suggests there might be a chronic weakness there. And while they say he should be cleared by June, that means his first critical months as a pro are going to be spent rehabbing, not training, not learning the playbook, not building chemistry with his new teammates. And this is where the risk just becomes truly frightening. I mean, think about it. We are talking about a gigantic human being. At 6'6", 327 pounds, the amount of sheer force and pressure that's going through Caleb Banks' feet on every single snap is just astronomical. For a guy whose whole game is built on explosive, violent power coming from the ground up, a bad foot isn't just a problem, it can be a career ender. It's like finding a crack in the foundation of a skyscraper. It puts the whole entire structure at risk. So with that huge risk laid out so clearly, the big question is, why? Why on earth would the Vikings take this chance? We're going to get into their side of the story in just a moment. But first, a quick word on how you can support what we do here at NFR Nexus. If you're looking for a fun gift for any of the football fans in your life, young or old, we've actually created a series of NFL-themed coloring books. They are perfect for kids, grandkids, or even for adults just looking for a way to relax. You can check them out by using the link in our description or by just scanning the QR code you see on your screen now. Your support really does help us keep making these deep dives. Thank you. All right, so how in the world did the Vikings justify this pick? The front office, they heard all the same concerns we just talked about. They saw the exact same medical reports. But you know what? They looked at that red flag and they saw an opening. They came to believe that the very injury that scared all those other teams away was the only reason they even had a shot at drafting a player with his kind of rare talent. And this quote right here from the Vikings acting GM Rob Brzezinski, this sums up their entire strategy. This is the core of it. In their minds, a 100% healthy Caleb Banks isn't a guy you draft at number 18. He's a top 10 pick, maybe even a top 5 pick. They believe that his foot injury created what you'd call a market inefficiency, a temporary discount on an elite blue-chip asset, and they pounced on what they saw as a massive value that just wouldn't have been there otherwise. The head coach, Kevin O'Connell, he hammered that point home. And listen to the language he uses here. It's really important. He didn't just say Banks was a good player. He called him a potential top 10 caliber talent and a difference maker. Those are very powerful, very specific words in the NFL. What he's saying is that the Vikings believe they didn't just get a nice defensive tackle at pick 18. No, they think they landed a blue-chip cornerstone player that you almost never find outside of the draft's first few selections. It shows that the front office and the coaches were totally aligned on this huge bet. And this slide right here shows you exactly why they have that conviction. These are the traits you just can't coach. A guy who is 6'6", 327 pounds, with rare explosive power, that's a combination that maybe a handful of people on the entire planet have. And when you watch his college tape, when he was healthy, there are plays where he just looks like a man playing against boys. He has the potential to be a true game wrecker. That's a player who can single-handedly collapse the pocket from the inside and just erase running lanes, forcing an entire offense to change what they want to do. And look, this wasn't just some theoretical thing. We have proof that he can do it. In 2024, his last fully healthy season, he had 4.5 sacks. And you have to watch how he got them. It wasn't just cleaning up plays. He proved on the field against elite SEC competition that he could turn all that raw physical talent into real tangible production. That 2024 game tape, that's what the Vikings are betting their first-round pick on. Now, you have to understand, this wasn't just some blind, reckless gamble. The Vikings did an exhaustive amount of homework on this guy. They met with him at the Senior Bowl. They had a formal interview with him at the Combine. Then they used one of their precious top 30 pre-draft visits to fly him out to their facility for a full day of meetings and medical checks. They even sent their defensive line coach to Florida for a private workout, just to see him move in person. They kicked the tires on this thing from every single angle to make sure they were comfortable with the player, his character, and most importantly, his medical outlook. And this right here is the ultimate trump card for the Vikings. Their belief in this pick really hinged on their complete confidence in their own medical staff. The organization truly believes they have some of the world's leading experts, specifically when it comes to foot and ankle injuries. So they feel like their medical team's expertise gives them a unique competitive advantage. It allows them to take on a risk that other teams, maybe with less specialized staff, just weren't willing to accept. So when you add it all up, you have the massive risk of the injury on one side and the tantalizing upside of a top 10 talent on the other. You have the rest of the league scratching their heads versus the team's internal conviction. You arrive here. This isn't just another draft pick. This is a defining, franchise-altering, swing-for-the-fences move that is going to land in one of two very, very different places. And this really is the bottom line, isn't it? The range of outcomes here is about as wide as the Grand Canyon. In the absolute best-case scenario, the foot is a total known issue. The surgery worked perfectly, he stays healthy, and he becomes that game-wrecking all-pro player that the Vikings see in their dreams. He becomes the undisputed steal of the 2026 draft and transforms their entire defense for a decade. But in the worst case, that foot injury just lingers. It saps his explosion, it keeps him on the sideline, and he never even comes close to reaching that massive potential. And the pick goes down as a first-round bust, a wasted opportunity that could haunt the franchise for years to come. There is very little middle ground here. This is exactly the kind of move that championship teams are often built on, taking that calculated risk on an elite talent that other teams are just too scared to touch. But if that calculation is wrong, man, it can set the franchise back for years, not just because you missed on the pick, but because of the opportunity cost. Can you imagine watching Dylan Thieneman become an all-pro safety somewhere else, while Caleb Banks is struggling with injuries? That's the nightmare scenario. The outcome of this one, fascinating decision, will absolutely shape the Vikings' future, for better or for worse. So, the question now falls to us. Was this a stroke of genius by the Vikings? Did they identify a hidden gem that's going to pay off in a massive way? Or was it a foolish reach, an unnecessary gamble that's going to come back to bite them? His legacy, and the legacy of the people who picked him, really does hang in the balance. We would love to hear what you think. Did the Vikings get a steal, or are they going to regret this big time? Drop your take in the comments below. And if you learned something today, do us a favor and hit that like button. Thanks for watching NFL Nexus.